to another high value conversation. I'm Mark Jackson. Great to have you here and watching this video tonight. I'm going to have on Dr. Michelle Paolo, and she's going to be going over narcissistic behaviors and toxic relationships. Now, I know some of us out there wondering like, ooh, man, that's heavy. But really, I think a lot of people are going through this right now and would love to have some kind of insight into seeing if it's happening to themselves, who else is being, manipulated in their lives. And I'm going to go ahead and invite Dr. Michelle in now. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and wave at some of you. Thank you for coming. Hey, Dr. Michelle. Hey.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining, you guys.
Thank you for being here. Everyone, I want to encourage you, please ask questions. We'll answer them at the end, but you can put any questions you want into the comments, and we'll scroll through towards the end and go back and answer them. All right. So, Dr. Michelle, you want to give everybody your credentials again one more time?
Yes. So, like Mark said, my name is Dr. Michelle Paolo. That doctor stands for PhD. That PhD is in a field called health psychology. My specialty is all about combining the physical health and mental health, putting those two things together. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Texas, but I do offer coaching services all over the U.S. and internationally as well. So I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades. I do consulting, I do education. I love doing these lives. And by the way, if you joined the last live, thank you for coming back. If this is your first time, thank you for joining. And here's the benefit of doing the live. And Mark, I know you understand this. You have the opportunity to ask a question maybe that you wanted to know that's very specific, as opposed to getting general advice online. So thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you for being here, especially. All right, so you know how I like to do it. I like to dive right in. Again, our topic tonight is narcissistic behavior, manipulation, and toxic relationships. I've been seeing a lot of, I think people call it red pill or something like that, but I've seen like all these people deciding all of a sudden they're relationship gurus. And I said, you know what? I see this as a hot topic, but you know what I want? I want the real information about what's going on. So I came to you and I said, you know what? I think this would be a great topic for us. So what I think is, first one I want to ask you is, what is the hardest part about trying to deal with a narcissistic person?
Yeah, one of the hardest parts about narcissism, a person who has narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder is kind of the full name of that diagnosis. It is an actual, just let me get the record straight. It is an actual psychological diagnosis. This isn't just, movie stuff, or this isn't just stuff that you hear people throw around that word. That is an actual mental health diagnosis. One of the hardest parts is that folks who struggle with this, and I know that sounds strange because a lot of people are on the receiving end of the toxic traits, but it is, there's a lot of suffering going on with personality disorders. But one of the hardest parts is that I'm going to need everyone who's in this gathering today to wrap their mind around something I'm about to say. The hardest part is realizing that there are folks with narcissism or a personality disorder all around us. And I don't want you like looking out, like, oh, who is it? Who isn't it? Just know this. Normal people that you interact with all the time. And I'm gonna tell you guys right now, the best way you're gonna get anything out of what we're gonna talk about today is your willingness to go, okay, what's tough about narcissism? The hardest part is realizing that could be your aunt, that could be your pastor, that could be, I joke, but not funny, the call could be coming from inside of the house, which is like your closest people to you could be the people who are the most toxic and the most narcissistic and struggle the most, to the point where you've been dealing with it for so long. That is what's so hard about narcissism, is it's happening to you, it's all around you, and nobody's run a sign that's like, I have narcissism, stay away from me. It doesn't work that way. So that's the hardest part right there, to be honest with you.
And they do it nicely, right? You get nicely manipulated.
Yes, very good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it comes in all shapes and sizes.
I was talking to you yesterday, and I remember you saying something like, the hardest part for some people they're gonna be on here to understand is that narcissism, we think is negative, right? So unless we're experiencing it from someone who's being mean or trying to like really pressure us to do something, then we already block it out from thinking that it's happening to us. But it could be happening to us nicely, like you said, maybe from a relative or someone that's close to us.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think one of the hardest things to understand, kind of piggybacking off of the first question, is the word manipulation.
Mm.
And if you're out there listening, you're watching this right now, I need you to understand. Think about what just happened in your body when I said the word manipulate. Probably something like, oh, that's bad. But again, that's one of the hardest things about narcissism or toxic traits, to your point, Mark, is that it comes in all shapes and sizes. There can be, pretty narcissism or, difficult to recognize, especially if you've been in it for so long. But, one of the toughest parts about this is if you think of like narcissism and you think of manipulation, and the first things that come to your mind is this like ugly, this
like,
bad thing,
yeah.
you're missing it. You're going to miss it. And so remember, I'm going to keep reeling you guys back to remember what I said in this session today, this hour session that we're going to do. I'm telling you, if you're hearing something from me and your first impression is like, no, a manipulator is like this dirty person who's like a monster and they're terrible. Not true. There's going to be a mix. There's going to be a mix going on of positive traits. There's going to be a mix going on of like, oh, I didn't even see that. Or similarly, I thought guilt tripping was normal. That's just what grandma does to get you to come to Sunday dinner, guilt trip you. Guess what? That's manipulation. So
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How can we protect ourselves from this narcissism and manipulation?
Yeah. So let's first start with this. Again, stick with me. Try to wrap your mind around this. Try, if you can, to see that word manipulation in your mind. And instead of going, oh, it's this thing that's bad, I want you to take all that judgment off for a second and think of the word manipulation as a tool. I want you to think of manipulation as a way that somebody gets what they need. Don't judge it. Don't go, oh, a person who manipulates is evil, nasty, bad. And don't think somebody who is trying to get you to cooperate or trying to get you to be, compromise. Oh, those people are good. So what I want you to do, go back to manipulate. When you hear that word in your mind, I want you to go, take all the judgment off and just say, oh, it's a tool. It's a tool people use to get what they want. So the first thing you really need to recognize when it comes to manipulation is it's not about, oh, this person is evil. Oh, this person couldn't possibly be manipulating me because they're not evil, they're not bad people. Strike that from your mind, because that's the first thing you have to do is realize and recognize, wait a second, let me give you this definition. If you are changing what you want to do, what you feel, what you were going to do next, guess what? You've been manipulated. You have to recognize it, right?
Definitely. And like you said, too, it comes in positive and negative form, because I know I manipulate my children and they're eating something they don't want to eat all the time. Eat your vegetables, or, I got to get Roman from watching so many cartoons. I'm like, let's watch a little National Geographic. And he's like, oh, elephants, so I use it in a good way sometimes, so, I see where you're coming from.
That's right. But, and I think the reality is the harder, so not harder, but step one for really anything that you do when it comes to mental health, when it comes to like really being observational of yourself or what's going on in your relationships in your life, is to go, first of all, what are my judgments? What are my judgments of people? What are my judgments of words? Word meaning is critical. So if you are listening to this right now and you go, oh, manipulate, oh, that couldn't possibly be my grandma, I want you to go pause on that judgment and just ask yourself. And look, I'm putting my hands up and I'm going, I'm not judging grandma. I'm not. But I'm saying, if when you talk to grandma, your path of what you were going to do or how you were going to feel or how you felt, if it changed and now you're going down grandma's path, you've now been manipulated. I'm just saying, manipulation is actually just a tool. So you got to step back long enough to recognize, number one, I can't judge what manipulation means. It's just a tool for people to get what they want or get what they need. Remember how I mentioned earlier about narcissism? I'm gonna wrap this in. We can be, and I hope people have empathy for mental health conditions. What's tough with personality disorders is that one of the number one factors for any personality disorder is that they struggle to get their needs met. That's how it develops in the first place. So think about you at your most desperate time of life. Would you have lied to get what you needed? Would you have twisted the truth to get what you needed? Would you fight, kick, scream, all those things to get your needs met? I would. Now imagine a pervasive, meaning long-standing, it never stops. So for somebody with a personality disorder, that sensation of desperation, it never stops. But here's the scary part. they won't stop at anything to get their needs met, you know, to get those needs met. So when me and you might do a mark just because we're in like survival mode, I haven't eaten in a week, I'll lie, kick, scream, steal, whatever, that feeling never, that sensation never leaves somebody with a personality disorder, which really sucks. But I will say this, that doesn't make it our job to take on those manipulations at our own loss.
Right. And so I think what you're saying is that's where the nuance comes in, where the person, yeah, they may have a narcissistic personality disorder, but it still can come to us in negative ways because they're always getting what they want and they have a compulsion to get what they want, which kind of always makes us be the person who's always having to compromise or always having to get them their way. And it can, you know, come in a lot of different relationships. And I think that's why it's good that you're shining a light on where it can come from. So let me ask you this. What are some of the signs? Like, how do I recognize? So you talked about what manipulation is, what narcissism is. So I know about the disorder. I know the tool. How do I recognize this person using that tool on me?
Yeah. Oh, it's tough. You cannot say manipulation. You cannot say that, you know, manipulation is a tool. We're not going to judge it. We're just going to say, okay, it's a tool. It's a way to get what you need, get your needs met. But you cannot say that word and also call it like easy to recognize. So if you're listening right now and you're engaged in this conversation, I want you to know, I don't want you to feel bad about this. I don't want you to feel like this is obvious or this is so easy. You know why I'm telling you? Because a lot of friends and family will be looking at you, clapping in your face, going, how do you not see this? Manipulation, the heart of manipulation is that it's sneaky. And you guys may have heard this before, that there is always a kind of cluster or a crystal or a touch of truth in a bunch of lies. So part of manipulation is that it is hard to see. So I'm glad that you brought this up, because I just want to start everyone, you know, if you're hearing this going, yeah, I've been manipulated or I've been used, or my qualities, my good qualities have been used against me. Maybe you're feeling like you're too nice of a person that
Too nice. Too nice.
Too nice. So I think to myself, you know, don't, it's meant to be sneaky, whether intentional or unintentional. It's
blame yourself.
Don't blame yourself for this, right? It's meant to be sneaky. It's insidious, meaning it gets in and you don't even realize it. So, you know, when me and you were talking about signs of manipulation, you know, toxic traits of manipulation, be it, folks, by the way, like I said earlier, I don't want you looking around for a narcissist. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want you like, oh, I'm going to figure it out, because it's really difficult. So I don't want you don't need to go around and say, oh, that person's a narcissist. It doesn't, we're going to get to that in a second. It doesn't really matter. But how do you recognize manipulation? So as I said, I think the first thing you need to do is first recognize you have a value structure built around that word. Not right, not wrong, not good or bad. You just have a value system around that word. If you can first start by going, okay, I'm going to take the judgment off and say, manipulation comes in all forms of fashions with big old smiles and big old pretty, you know, teeth and all that, as much as it does pushiness, right? As it's passive aggressive, as much as it is pleasant seeming. Take that away. Now I want you to be ready as much with a clear slate, clear mind as you can to hear what I'm going to say. So the things about manipulation I want you to look out for is if, again, you start changing what your normal path would have been that day, sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically, but you start to change your aim that day because somebody came in and kind of asked you to do something, told you to do something, they were feeling some kind of way, and now you feel some kind of way, and they've wrapped you in it to the point where now you are no longer going on your path. If that's happened to you, you've been manipulated. So it's tough. There's so much here. I can go into subtle signs. Let me give you a couple, you know, a couple signs of manipulation. You might want to sit down and maybe, if we're talking about your spouse, your partner, and you want to start having conversations, improving your dynamic, and everyone thinks, oh, I'm gonna fix this manipulation. I'm gonna nip it right with my partner. You sit down, you start to have this conversation, bringing up tough topics, and the time's right. You know, you're not trying to talk, you know, while somebody's falling asleep, or you know, you're out, you it's good time, everything's good. And you start to bring things up and the person just doesn't even want to hear about it. Or you start to like have a real conversation and suddenly it's like, oh, you know what? I don't feel good for this. It's not a right time. And every time you try to bring up something important, it's not a good time. And they don't want to talk about it. So what's interesting is listen to that, put it in the formula I just gave you, which was, did you just change the behavior, your goal, your intention, what you had in mind, because this other person redirected you?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying is like that it doesn't have to be nasty. It doesn't have to be like this person is like screaming at you. But if you're not doing what you intended to do, manipulated.
No, you're right, because that's where the toxicity comes in, right? Because you know, people it's all now they always talk about toxic relationships, but it's true. If you're always the person who's easygoing, who always has to be flexible, who always compromises for the other person, and then today you want your way, or you want to, you know, establish what you want and who you are, and the person is mad or angry, or then they have to change the subject, or like you said, don't want to have the conversation. Now it's no, you're not getting it. It's always going to be my way. So, you know, those, like you said, those are signs. That,
I was going to say, I'm so glad you brought that up. How many people, I just want you to ask yourself, how many people are like, oh, well, you know, compromising is good. Yeah, compromise. Yeah, that sounds good. I want you to know, in your heart, your soul, your spirit, your mind, whatever sensation you just had in your body is your core value about compromise. But what if, I'm going to make it real dark for a second, what if somebody with narcissism or somebody who's pretty darn toxic knows your value system about compromise? Now, they're going to use that word specifically to get what they want. And what do we call that? Manipulation. Yeah. How twisted is that?
Yeah, and I think it's even more messed up because, like you said, you can't tell that they're even doing it to you, because most of the time I feel like in relationships we want them to work, right? And then some of them we're stuck in them literally. Like you can't change your mother, your father, your siblings, your aunts, uncles, right? You might be able to change your spouse or the relationship you have, but a lot of these relationships are kind of permanent. So when they start becoming, you know, either narcissistic, toxic, manipulative, or combative, you know, sometimes we want them to be good. So we start being the compromiser to get back to a good place, not even knowing that's playing right into the toxic nature of the relationship itself.
By the way, and I wanted to drop this because I already forgot it. I'll mention it again at the end in case you miss it, but my Instagram page, Dr. Michelle Psychology, I have been posting in my story today all kinds of posts about narcissism, about toxic traits that are actual examples of this. So check it out. I kept seeing them one after another. I kept reposting them in light of today. So check out my page because you're going to see example after example about what manipulation really looks like and what toxicity really looks like. But to your point about family, so we can talk about subtle traits till the end of time. I mean, and by the way, let me add another complicating factor. Just like anxiety, just like depression, just like ADHD, these are disorders, but the human still exists. Aside from that, the person still has all of their normal characteristics, all of their life experiences, all of their developmental experiences. So let's add another snag to toxic behavior, manipulation, narcissism is it doesn't always look the same with everyone. And again, we've been talking about like, well, sometimes it's pretty narcissism with a smile and you don't even recognize it. But you got to understand, if you're asking for signs, just because one person in your life does something does not make them narcissistic, okay? But it may be, for another person, absolutely part of their toxic traits. So another complicating factor is you have to remember, like I said, it's whether it's anxiety, depression, narcissism, everybody still has their way of doing things. So when I'm thinking about, here's what I want to bring it back to is family and friends, and the calls coming from inside the house, right? Let's make it deeper. If we talked about subtle ways, which I can do till the end of time, there's also really deep, really, really scary, really crappy things, really, let's talk about like bad manipulation. Let's talk about the call coming from inside the house. Keep this in mind. If your parent, it's calls coming from inside the house, as they say, If you grew up with a caregiver or a parent from day one, obviously, you know, and from as long as you can remember, this is how they are.
Yeah.
That is going to push against your sort of, remember what I started with, willingness to go, uh-oh, you know, that like this person has an issue, has a really serious issue. Why? Because they've been like that steady.
Yeah, you never could see it
For as long as you've known them. And so your neurology will push back against the notion that, man, like grandma really struggles with accepting me for who I am. You know, my mom really is very critical, and it's weird because it seems like she uses me for things for herself, but it's like, but she was always like that. Are you saying that's bad? Is that wrong? Is that toxic? Well, so the reality is, not only is it hard to recognize because it's been there for so long, but it's now normal for you. So it's normal because it's been there for them for so long, but now it's considered normal. On top of that, it's always, I want to say, because of our culture, because of, you know, family dynamics, we're also encouraged that it's normal behavior and that this is what a mom does. This is what grandma says.
Yeah, you say that.
So
Yeah.
if that's what they say, that's normal, acceptable. But let's go a little bit deeper. We talk about subtle ones. Let's talk about some really scary stuff. You've probably heard the word gaslighting. Gaslighting's rough, and it's become like a really common term. I'll be perfectly honest, that was never a term that I ever used in school, in my training, education. It's definitely a thing. So in case you hear that all the time and go, what is this? It's phony baloney made up. It's not. It is a real term, but we have another word for it. I mean, it's just essentially making a person believe they're crazy and wrong all the time.
Oh my gosh. You hear that all the time when someone's like, you made me feel like I was crazy, or you lied to me, or you know, like, I feel like I was crazy. When they finally get the truth out, they finally get help, they're like, the whole time I thought it was me.
Oh, I hear that all the time as a provider, where it's like, you know, I've been sold this lie for so long. I believed it. I believed it myself. So those are big signs, but I don't want you guys to confuse big signs with easy to see. You
So
know,
let me ask you this: if you already have like a sense of this is going on, like, so say somebody came to the call tonight, like, I feel like I'm in a toxic relationship, or I feel like it's going on. How do they change the dynamic? How do they combat this if they're able to recognize the signs that you're giving them and they're thinking about right now, like, I am in one, after this I want to do something about it? How do they change the dynamic of a toxic relationship?
you guys know I'm always going to move backwards before I can move forward. I'm always going to like backtrack the question before I can go forward on the question, because you know how, okay, let me see if I can make this example and then I'll go to the question. If you go to try to lose weight, or if you're trying to go on a diet, you're trying to exercise, if you've never exercised, been in sports in your life, and you're like, I'm going to start going to the gym, it's like, oh, that's really tough because of the foundation. What foundation do you have? So you really, in theory, going to like, oh, I'm going to get all these clothes, I'm going to start going to the gym, when you never even like really walked in your life. You never really like just did that stuff. And you want to go to the gym, it's really tough. Same as right now. So like I said, I got to back it up before I can go forward. So here's the foundation of this. Here's what people aren't going to tell you. And this is why, if you've seen all this stuff online, to your point earlier, Mark, about like, you can see all kinds of advice from all kinds of people who probably shouldn't be giving it. What you don't hear, everybody, is that it's not even about the dynamic. Not about the dynamic. Everybody wants to work on the dynamic. I'm going to tell you something. If you start to look at these things, you're really starting to hear people kind of chirping in your ear, your friends or family going, hey, we really love you. We're really concerned. Or like, this is a mess. What is going on? What you actually need to do is pause and spend time with yourself. What this comes down to is backing yourself up and go and asking yourself. Today I've said core value a bunch, core belief a bunch. I haven't really said goals too much today, but what you have to do before you can move forward is you have to have some kind of idea who you are. What foundation are you coming from? You know, whether it's, so here's what's tough. If we could categorize, you know, there's toxic stuff, toxic behavior, just toxic behavior, really. Then there's like narcissism. I'm not saying they're different, mutually exclusive, but let's just, for sake of argument, there's toxic behavior, there's narcissism, right? And then there's out and out abuse, okay? We often talk about how abusive relationships are really difficult to leave, and they are. One of the things that people don't talk about enough in leaving an abusive relationship is the fact that, you know, what's the plan? It's not talked enough about, and sometimes the plan is just like where you're going to go, but I mean much bigger than that. I mean, what were your goals before this relationship? What were your core values before this relationship? Who are you as an individual? It's not so, it is, don't get me wrong, just like your literal plan of, well, I'm going to leave this abusive relationship. And again, I'm going to tie this into toxic behavior because it's the same. I mean, you can talk about abuse, you can talk about toxic, but at the end of the day, one of the problems that people have is not that they can't see the toxicity, which is your question, not that they can't see the abuse, but if you really, and everybody who's listening right now, stop and ask yourself, if you're thinking this is going on to you, and I go, who are you? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Do you have an answer? And I'm going to say a lot of people don't have an answer. They literally have a place that they may go, God willing, hopefully, a place, a safe place. But therein lies the issue. So let's get down to it.
They're scared to be alone. And like you said, where do you go? Even deeper, like you said, we're going deeper. Where do you go inside yourself? Because like you said, you might have somewhere to go, but where do you go inside? If you don't have those core values, if you don't know who you are, if you don't say, I've had enough, based on a real principle. Because most of the time you'll notice that when people do finally decide to leave and make a plan, a principle has been broken or something inside of themselves has been broken, or they realize this person really doesn't love me. And maybe love is a core value and that's been broken. And then they're able to move on because like you said, you have the plan and you have the inner part that's, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to myself now because what I wanted and what I thought I was going to get from you, I'm not getting, and now I can leave.
Yeah. I was just going to say, again, this is, you guys have, like I said, I invited you to be willing to hear some hard stuff today. So here's what I'm going to say. The people most likely to be overly nice, very laid back, always willing to compromise, just lay back, just go with the, always willing to compromise. Manipulated. The people most likely to be manipulated or stuck in a toxic relationship, stuck in a toxic relationship, don't blame yourself, are the people who never had a plan for themselves. They didn't have, and I don't want to say like you didn't have goals, you didn't have plans, but I'm hard truth. Sorry, guys. It wasn't strong enough. It wasn't strong enough. So the people who are most likely to be manipulated and stuck in a toxic relationship are those who don't have crystallized goals. So here's what I want everyone to do. I want everybody to, if again, you're really concerned about this, you just got to literally start making a list. Who are you? What do you stand for? What do you want? And then you get to start navigating into becoming crystallized and firm. Now, this gets complicated because everyone's like, well, what about the relationship? I want to make the relationship work. But if you're only like half, because you're like, oh, I'm in this dynamic, and the only thing you can see is a dynamic, you are not a whole person yourself.
Yeah. A lot of times people get caught up too, like, I see the good in them.
Yeah.
And the other person, or I wanted to help bring that out of them, or, help them till they got better. But like you said, it's a disorder. So you're kind of confusing yourself. Another thing I like is like you being here today is also opening that awareness that the way people feel on the call right now, or that people are listening right now, you see what it feels like to have somebody talk through it with you. So I think that's why therapy is so important, right? Like you said, your plan wasn't strong enough. Yeah. So when you're trying to figure out, how do I get this done, or you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. It's true. And is it cheesy to be like, go to therapy? Sure, it's cheesy, but I'm going to tell you why. You can see through the vein of this entire conversation that the core of manipulation is that it's hard to recognize. And then, especially when it's been going on for so long, sometimes decades plus, you might even recognize it, but then you've been in it so long, not only do you grapple with, no, but that's normal. Even if you think it's toxic, sometimes people go, it's toxic, it's bad. but it's normal. It's just the way that it is. Let's say you grab all that, you get to all that. Then it's like, do you have a plan? So I need you to know when you come to therapy, when we talk about that as an option, you know, what's nice is, at least with me, the way that I talk here is the way that I talk in therapy. So this is who I am as a person, but it's judgment free. I'm not going to change. I don't want to change your core values. I want to help you ascertain what your values are, not me telling you, kind of like friends, family, your church, all kinds of people have everything to tell you how to live your life. So the difference with someone like me is, no, I'm going to pull out from you. Like I said, you have a list. First, we're going to start with the list and say, what's on your list? And people show up and they go, I don't have a list. So with therapy, as opposed to your friends, your family, who are great, you should have them in your corner, okay? None of my values matter in this moment. My job is solely to say, who are you? Let's make that stronger and then keep going. And look, I'll tell you what, if you can find that, you think, in your community without a therapist, go for it. But this person needs to be unbiased. They need to be willing to like be compassionate, but also give you like hard truths, kind of like I'm doing now. Also not impart like, well, I think you should just seek this, or I think you should just do this. You know, people got plenty of things to tell you how to live, but people are not great at going, no, you're the star. What do you want? What do you want out of life? But that's what therapy brings that maybe you can't get in other places. Non-judgment. I'm going to look at the whole story, process how you got here, give you that compassion, give you that space, and help you develop your plan. So that's the idea behind therapy. And again, I cannot stress enough, there are thousands, probably thousands, maybe hundreds of accounts on Instagram who are going to show you this is what toxic behavior looks like. Here's an example. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, you're off base. It's not about the dynamic. It's about you. Never forget, the people most likely to be manipulated are those who don't have a solid plan. Have you ever gone into a casino and you hadn't decided what your budget was?
Yeah, like you said too, the people that's got all the answers on the internet. I mean, I don't see DR in front of their name. They're just speaking from personal experience. Like, oh, I used to have this relationship and that was toxic. And it's like, how are you speaking for everyone when you only have your only available partners and you're telling them how they should be based on how you want to be? Whereas, like you're saying, with therapy, it's more like, how do you want the person across from you? What do you want? And let me help you get to where you want, instead of me shedding my personal preferences on you. On top of that, like you said, relationship wise, the people in your life that can help you, sometimes the person that's helping you, if it's not a therapist, they might have their agenda, right? So you're talking to your mom about your boyfriend who she's always disliked, and you have finally had the one thing you want to talk to her about, and she's like, oh, you should leave him, like instead of how y'all can work it out. And you're like, all right, I would take that advice, but that advice might have been in her best interest instead of your best interest. It could happen even to the person you're asking for help from.
Exactly. And you know what, I want to say this too, because I keep saying, if you don't have a strong sense of your identity, you guys have heard the word boundaries, blah, 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 but I cannot stress enough how many people are saying they have boundaries, but they don't. Sometimes you get to the point where you're like, okay, here's what I want, right? Here's what I'm going to stick by. I refuse to X. And they even tell their partner that, if we go back to kind of like a romantic relationship. And they'll tell their partner that, if I'm out with my friends, I'm having a good time with my friends, I may not answer my phone. Please don't call me 17 times. Okay? They may say that. But if at the end of the day, you're still answering their phone and you're still messing with this person, we have a problem here. And back it up with me. Why? Because you don't have a crystallized sense, a strong sense of what you're saying no to and what you expect. So let me make it a little bit more complicated, and I hope this brings it home. Today we're talking about narcissism, narcissistic traits, toxic traits, all that stuff, manipulation. I'm going to make it so much simpler than that. You are going to run yourself ragged trying to figure out if it's a toxic trait, if it's narcissism. You don't need to do all that. You're doing too much. All you need to know is what you want and what you don't want. And guess what? If your partner can't do that for you, they may not be narcissistic. If you can't meet what they want and their needs and their wants and all that stuff, and they don't meet yours, it's real simple. They're not for you.
I like this. So you're saying the solution to all this, instead of being like, is this person, is this person, is that person, is this person, is this person? You're saying the solution is I set my boundaries and what I want, and then people just bounce off of them. And if you're not with it,
Yes.
you ain't with it, and
And
that's how people start to protect
That's
themselves.
it. That's it. Here's what's crazy. You guys, we are still sitting here. And it's good, don't get me wrong. I want you to recognize the toxic chase, don't get me wrong. But we are manipulated by the manipulator still, trying to figure out what their behavior is.
Mm. Mm.
Does it matter? Does it meet what you want in a relationship? Is it against what you want in a relationship? Plain and simple. So the people who, all right, you guys, you've seen my personality enough at this point. Let me tell you something from experience. When people come to my door professionally, you know, they know real quick who I am. Why? Because they can sense and they live and experience what I expect, where my boundaries are. I make it really clear. So, I'll talk to colleagues who go, oh, it's really tough if you're dealing with this or dealing with that. And I'm like, I don't really have those problems, because the people who are trying to get one over on me.
Yeah.
Yes, that happens.
Yeah.
That happens to doctors. That, oh, I'm going to get one over on her, or I have my own agenda.
So let me ask you this.
Have your own agenda.
So let me
It
ask you,
doesn't matter.
how do you keep them so firm? Because like you said earlier, like going to the gym, right? So say for instance, people want to start setting them, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying sometimes we get manipulated because we break them, especially when we think we're like hurting somebody's feelings, or somebody even uses sad manipulation. It's like, Mom, I'm not coming to dinner this Sunday. I'm tired of doing that. I've been doing stuff like kids. She's like, really? You're not coming? And then you got, so. Yeah. How do you set them? But even more so, how do you set them? How do you find the strength to hold them? How do you execute on that?
Yeah. Whew. It's tough. It's really tough, you guys. It's really, really tough. So, first of all, recognition. Second of all, developing a plan. Third of all, working on the plan before you ever kind of execute the plan. I'm gonna tell you, if you don't believe in yourself and your own plan, it's not gonna work. You're just faking it then. You're just saying words out of your mouth that you don't even believe yourself. So how do you stick to the plan? Well, first and foremost, I like to help my clients do it in manageable pieces as much as possible, starting to live the way that they are envisioning, right? That plan, that goal, that path. So, by the way, small side note, the other thing you got to realize, and why this is so hard of a question to answer, and how long does it take and how do you stick with it, is because, unfortunately, as I said, it's likely insidious in your life. If you're in a toxic relationship with your partner, let's say, there is a very good chance you may also be, air quotes, a pushover at work. You may also be a pushover with your friends. So why this is so hard to stick with is because, okay, has this ever happened to you? I go both ways, so don't hate on me for it. Depends on the situation, but you're at the store and somebody's behind you, cuts in line, and you're like, oh my God, and you just let it happen. There's chances here, or they might say, oh, can I confront you? And you're like, oh, I'm going to say yes. You can say no. So often this is really tough to stick with because it's everywhere in your life. It happens. It's not just in your relationship, it's everywhere. But to answer your question now, if we bring it back, how do you stick with it? There are constant opportunities. There's constant ways to practice. There are constant ways. So first, bit of advice, don't start with your hardest nemesis. Don't start with the person that you have the hardest time with.
Don't go to expert right away, huh?
Don't go expert mode right away. You are going to get annihilated.
Start on rookie.
Yeah, you cannot start off with grandma's guilt tripping. You're gonna lose, okay? You're gonna lose. Okay, you go, look, I come from an Italian family. I come from that strong heritage. I come from the heritage where eating is part of your culture. And I mean, you can't say no because it's insulting. So let me say, in a lot of cultures, it's that way. You can't, you go to Sunday dinner, you're going to eat everything. Do you really think you're okay, I'm on a diet, or I have to go gluten-free because I have celiac disease, or I can't process lactose anymore. You think you're going to go to your Sunday dinner and look at your granny in the face and say, I'm not eating your homemade ice cream anymore, and you're just going to off the bat it like that? You're not. So I'm going to tell you right now, don't start that way. Yeah. But fortunately, there's so many other areas in your life that this stuff is insidious in. So you can try it anywhere. Start easy mode. Go to, when you go to the the grocery store and somebody cuts in front of you and they're like, can I cut? You have to go, no. Now here's the thing, just like going to the gym. Do you go into the gym and go into expert mode and you go, I'm going to run on the treadmill for five miles? I would not recommend it.
You gotta build that muscle up.
Correct. So, but even on day one, are you going to be in pain? Yes, you are. Same thing at the grocery store with a perfect stranger. Okay, what about telemarketers? People are pretty good at this nowadays.
Oh yeah.
You have a hard time telling, like, no, it's okay. No, I gotta go.
But you know what? Just like the gym, though, you're gonna feel good too. Like you say, you're gonna have that pain, but little by little, as you start doing it, you're gonna find out who you are. Like you said, you start finding out who you are.
Yeah.
I want to show you one of the questions that we have. Lauren says, so would it also? So we were talking about how it's actually a disorder and some people really have to get their way. So it's hard to recognize sometimes. You know, some people doing it deliberately, but sometimes other people have a disorder. And we were talking about how we let that happen to us so much. So she asked, so would it also be considered some type of personality disorder if you're a person that always falls for manipulation?
It can be. So there is actually a very common side effect, if you will, of being in a relationship, being closely tied somehow with a person with a personality disorder. And there's a phrase called codependency. There's a symptom. I think there's actually technically a disorder that it can be so severe that we call it a disorder, but it's most often a symptom.
I've heard of that. Codependency.
Yeah,
Wow.
Codependency. So Lauren, what you're getting at is something called codependency. Can it be so bad? Here's what I often see with codependency. Not even that codependency is like a very common disorder, but what we see is depression, anxiety.
Yeah.
Again, panic attacks. If you're constantly thinking that you must be crazy out of your mind, right? Because you're constantly gaslit into believing like, no, you're the problem. You name it, depression, anxiety, etc., and so on and so forth. So is the receiving end of a toxic relationship considered kind of a problem or a diagnosis or a disorder? Absolutely, in some form or fashion, the outcome. But look into codependency. Real quick definition of codependency is when your feelings of safety and security and goodness and like freedom are reliant on this person. So in other words, if they're dissatisfied with you, you're dissatisfied with you. And the only way you can feel satisfied, safe, secure, all those things, is if that person goes, I'm satisfied with you. What is the problem, though, with somebody who has a personality disorder? Sadly, go back to what I said at the beginning. They never experience satisfaction. They never experience safety themselves. It's sad. It's really sad. And we can have empathy, but that doesn't mean we're going to receive it.
Yeah. Wow, it's so interesting because, like you're saying about codependency, I was listening to a book with my son this morning. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis. It's about mentally thinking as an athlete, you know, and being able to separate the competition from your personality and who you think that you are. And it was describing the relationship between how kids look at competition. And so you look at it, you know, one or two ways. You know, it's like you hate competition because you're like, why do people always have to compete? You know, and so they purposely fail to try and hide the fact that they don't really want to give it their all. But there's also the other side that I think has a codependency where they only feel like they can experience love and approval if they win. Like from the parent or the coach or the people, they only feel, you know, happy if they're winning.
Yeah.
And so they wind up in adulthood always like chasing success because they equate that with like love and appreciation, but they'll get the results of success, but they won't get the love that they so deeply crave. And that codependent relationship was built, you know, early with attached to having to do something to please that person.
Yes. Does that sound complicated? It is. So I can tell you, and this isn't because, look, therapy takes as long as therapy takes, but it can take a long time to break that down. Because again, remember, go all the way back. First, you have to recognize how many people do I sit in front of? Look, if you've been listening tonight and you're going, no, that's ridiculous. Grannies are just that way. They're going to be pushy. That's okay. Normal and okay are two different things, by the way. But how many of you have been listening going, no, you know, that's okay. But we call that defensiveness. I don't really like that word. It's got, again, that negative value connotation. I call protectiveness. It's you going, this couldn't possibly be true. So I can work with people for a year just allowing a safe space. And I mean that. It's a safe space for them to kind of wrap their mind around, like, okay, it's not about whether or not Granny or my pastor or my brother is a good or bad person. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with that, people.
Yeah.
You know, all it has to do with is like, is this behavior, is this going on? Am I okay with any of this? It has nothing to do with if they're good or bad. So it can take you a year of safety to just go, whoa, this whole time, you know?
I think
so
another,
time.
I think another thing that I want to say just from personal experience too is that it's, and from personal experience from people witnessing me being assertive and making other people uncomfortable, and me displaying to the person that I know or that's with me that it's not my responsibility how that person took what I did. But they're like, Mark, calm down. You know, like, you can't do that. Like, you know, look how that person might feel. And I'm like, that's cool, but they're responsible for their feelings because I didn't have the intent to harm them. So I think manipulation and narcissism sometimes too can come from what you're just describing, as when you're trying to assert yourself, when you're trying to take those steps to start laying out your boundary to someone, and that person comes back to you as if they were offended or you hurt them. There's a difference
And they
between,
can be.
yeah,
So
I mean,
let me
like,
take it further. I'm
you
gonna
got,
put you on the spot. You brought this up. Great example. Here's what we do. Now, unless they're your children who can't go anywhere,
yeah,
everyone else can go.
yeah,
So what I encourage people to do, to your exact point, is look, if you're not into Mark, if you're not into me, that's okay.
yeah,
A lot of people aren't into me. That's
yeah.
fine. You know, people may not be into you. So here's what we all get to do. If we know that we're just not into assertive people, we get to go, okay, and go keep on our path. We get to keep on our path. We're not, you know, again, aside from your kids and aside from a couple people, I am not obligated to be around any personality that I'm not really into. You see how it's
Yeah.
much easier than even recognizing, like, oh, is that narcissism? You know, oh, Mark, is that too aggressive?
Yeah.
You don't need to figure any of that out.
I remember my mom told me when I was young, she was just like, you can never make yourself responsible for like how somebody else feels about something you do unless you did it on purpose. And that's how I live. I don't accept any responsibility for how someone, like someone said, I'm offended. That's cool. But if I didn't intend, like if that wasn't my goal, like I'm not going to take responsibility for you feeling sad about it. Now, can I look at it and say, oh, I can see how that could have been offensive? I can recognize that. But I still don't take the responsibility that I hurt you when that was a choice of yours. You know what I mean?
Well, and so here's what's, it's such a hard one. Oh, you guys, we could make this session 3. That's like such a big point. It's so fine. It's such a fine line because you can both. And it's so funny that you brought this up because I was actually, when we're talking about, you guys were talking about doing another session here, I was thinking about the topic of apologizing. Maybe we should do this again because
yeah, definitely.
It's so funny because I was actually going to bring this up. This is really tough, you guys. Like apologizing or being involved in somebody else's kind of hurt spirit or hurt feelings, you know, and going, oh, like I was a party to that or I was a part of that, or no, I'm not responsible for that, is really tough to like figure out. Because here's what I'm going to say. I think earlier it was like, how do I not get sucked into it myself, or how do I not get manipulated, and how do I, you know, all that, how does that go? I can totally accept that I hurt somebody's feelings. I can, even if the intent wasn't there, even if I'm like, I really didn't intend to do that, I can go, fuck, oh, I just hurt their feelings. Oh, you know, and that be true because they say it's true, and that changed nothing about how I feel. If that makes sense.
It makes 100% sense to me.
Right, because so I just like I changed the language a little bit because I'm gonna tell you, I apologize a lot. I actually really do. I apologize a lot. And some people, by the way, this is why I don't give really personal advice. So if you have questions, ask it now. If you have a question about what's going on in your life, because I'm gonna tell you, there are some people who have a hard time apologizing or have a hard time going, oh man, I was part of that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's people who have a hard time who can't do that, and that's a problem. But then there's a lot of people who over apologize, and that's a problem. That's what I'm saying. Like right now, I can't tell you like, do apologize, don't apologize. People apologize too much. I won't. You have to. It depends on you. So
it starts with self, like you said. It starts with your own core values, beliefs, who you are, what you want.
Yeah. So what I say is this: if you can wrap your mind around this, if you can allow somebody to say, man, you hurt my feelings, and know in your core and your spirit, hey, I wasn't intentional, and go, damn, like, it may be somebody you really care about. It may not be somebody you care about at all. But regardless, if you go, man, I'm sorry your feelings are, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry I was involved in that. But no, you still stand by what happened, or you still, that's okay. But that's a lot different than, well, I didn't intend to hurt you, so too bad. You can both say, I'm really sorry. But also, you know, notice how this is tied into manipulation.
Yeah.
But not change your mind if you said what you said and their feelings are hurt. You can do both.
Yeah.
You can say, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, and at the same time go, okay.
Well, anybody, if y'all have any questions, ask your questions now. Dr. Michelle, I'm going to let you go here in a second. I just want to say, do you have any final thoughts you want to say on this? And if you have any questions, ask them now.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, I got so much to say on that last topic. We'll save that. Yeah, you guys, last comments again. I can't stress enough. If you're sitting here trying to figure out the other person, chances are, again, your focus and your aim is still on the wrong place. You gotta focus in on yourself. Go inwards. Ask yourself, does this person match? If we're talking about toxicity and it's a close relationship, does this match what you want in your life? If it doesn't, it's not your cup of tea, and you have to have a plan of what you were going to do before you change your plan. What are you doing for yourself? So if you're sitting this, you know, cycle of going, I got it. How do I recognize it? Sometimes you don't even need to recognize it. You just ask, is this what I want, or is it not what I want?
Definitely. Well, I thank you for being here. I think next time we should do like apologies and empathy. You was really rocking and rolling. Cool.
It's a big one. It's so good though.
Yeah, being able to kind of recognize other people's feelings, be acknowledging of that, and, you know, doing it with an open heart and stuff like that. I think that's awesome. I think it'd be awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I always love having you on. I get so much great feedback when you come in and drop these gems live and after the fact in the replays. So I can't wait to do this with you again. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Go visit me on Dr. Michelle Psychology over on Instagram. And like I said, although I want you to focus on yourself, I'm always dropping information about how
always. In fact, I got the idea from this from following your content on what could be our next topic, because you were already giving such great information about toxic relationships. I wanted you to be able to share more. So yeah, please follow her.
Thanks, everyone. And I was going to say, yeah, if I post it, it means I stand behind it. So it's good stuff. Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot, Mark.
Always a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.